Bună seara tuturor, doamnelor, domnilor și în primul rând vă rog să-mi permiteți în numele nostru al tuturor să-i mulțumesc respectuos Alteței sale regale, Principesa Sofia a României, care ne-a făcut onoarea de a fi cu noi la această a 13-a Conferință de Crăciun la București. Acum, n-aș vrea să o invit, I wouldn't like to invite her to see you and you to see her, the guest of honor of this Christmas lecture. I shall simply, and for now, thank very much to Director Katherine Mathieson, Director of the Royal Institution in London, who will speak on why science matters. Okay, to know more about what will be going on tonight, I shall switch back to Romanian pentru a-l invita pe domnul profesor Ioan Aurel Pop, președintele Academiei Române, care va oferi laudatio pentru Katherine și conferința ei din această seară.
Mulțumesc. Alteța voastră regală, distinși participanți la cea de-a 13-a Conferință de Crăciun de la București. Mi-am cerut scuze față de distinsa doamnă director că voi vorbi românește, dar vă asigur că i-am explicat micul meu discurs în englezește înainte și a fost de acord să nu mai traducem. Anul acesta, proclamat de Organizația Națiunilor Unite Anul Fizicii și al Tehnologiilor Cuantice, marchează un secol de la nașterea mecanicii cuantice. Domeniul fizicii care, cum știți, avea să influențeze treptat toate științele și să modeleze cunoașterea umană mai recentă. O întâlnim peste tot, de la științele fundamentale și medicină până la psihologie și chiar filosofie. Începând cu anul 1925, universități, institute de cercetare și mai ales mari personalități, fizicieni cu deosebire, au scris despre știința cuantică și chiar despre istoria ei, fiindcă avea o istorie în urmă. Dar ca și mine știți că nu este suficient ca istoria să se scrie și este important ca realizările vieții devenite istorie să ajungă la toți oamenii. Și acesta este lucru extraordinar pe care îl datorăm instituției regale, Royal Institution. Principiile fundamentale ale acestei celebre organizații, Royal Institution, au fost împărtășirea cunoștințelor și cea mai bună diseminare posibilă a științei prin predare, prin cursuri teoretice și experimentale, prin conferințe. Pe vremuri, la noi se chemau în epoca interbelică, în Transilvania, extensiunea universitară. Continuând o succesiune distinsă de mari personalități, doamna Katherine Mathieson, biolog și popularizator al științei, fost director general al Asociației Britanice pentru Știință, conducând proiecte de predare a științelor la Fundația Națională pentru Știință, Tehnologie și Arte, a fost aleasă din 2022 să conducă Royal Institution, instituția regală. Royal Institution, al cărei patron este regele Charles al III-lea, a cunoscut cea mai mare strălucire încă de la început, în mare parte datorită unor personalități, în principal două, Sir Humphrey Davy și Michael Faraday, de fapt doi uriași ai științei universale. Royal Institution e o organizație caritabilă independentă, extrem de respectată, dedicată conectării cât mai multor oameni obișnuiți, cu lumea științei. Scopul său este de a reuni publicul și lumea științei cu credința într-o lume în care știința e accesibilă și utilă pentru toți. Acest lucru este subliniat și de doamna director Katherine Mathieson în strategia Royal Institution pentru perioada 2023-2028. Citez: la Royal Institution credem că știința transformă vieți și stă la baza lumii moderne, de la sănătate la cele mai noi tehnologii, mediu și cele mai îndepărtate colțuri ale Universului. Știința face parte din cultură și, așa cum spune ea, Royal Institution este o adevărată casă a științei unde toată lumea se simte binevenită. Știința pătrunde în toate domeniile vieții noastre și oferă soluții potențiale la mai multe dintre cele mai mari provocări ale lumii, munca noastră fiind mai importantă astăzi ca niciodată. Și adaugă: suntem foarte mândri de istoria noastră și de o comunicare a științei excelentă și încântați să avem ocazia de a găsi noi modalități de a ne asigura că toată lumea se poate bucura și toată lumea poate beneficia de știință. Astfel, un lucru cu adevărat extraordinar pe care Royal Institution l-a realizat a fost mutarea cunoștințelor științifice din laborator pe scena lumii. Opera celor doi la început, pe care i-am pomenit, Humphrey Davy și Michael Faraday. Această operă a început acum 200 de ani. Din anul 2013, începând, este și țara noastră gazdă a acestor conferințe extraordinar de binevenite și de bine primite, conferințele de Crăciun de la București, organizate de un grup de instituții de elită ale țării noastre, între care Institutul Național de Fizică și Inginerie Horia Hulubei, unul din membrii marcanți ai Academiei Române la secția de Fizică, Filarmonica George Enescu, Clubul Rotary București Curtea Veche și UEFISCDI din cadrul Ministerului Educației. Conferințele de Crăciun ale Royal Institution, deci, sunt cunoscute în întreaga lume și au avut vreme în acești 200 de ani să-și arate menirea, să valorifice moștenirea de descoperiri științifice de pionierat, demonstrații și să aibă o implicare publică. Din 1925, vă spuneam că avem un secol cuantic care a modelat fizica fundamentală și a schimbat întreaga gândire științifică, tehnologia și comunicarea. Azi e un adevărat privilegiu, pentru ca la prima conferință de Crăciun din istorie, din 1925, evocată aici, de la prima conferință au trecut 200 de ani, și să o avem aici pe însăși doamna Katherine Mathieson la noastră a 13-a conferință de Crăciun, cu noroc, firește, la București. Înainte de a încheia, îngăduiți-mi să vă spun că păstrez amintiri deosebite în legătură cu două ceremonii care au avut loc legate de Alteța sa regală pe acea vreme, Prințul Charles, care a fost de 2 ori doctor honoris causa la două dintre cele mai mari, la cele mai mari 2 universități ale țării, Universitatea Babeș-Bolyai din Cluj și Universitatea din București. Am avut norocul, șansa deosebită să stau de vorbă și să păstrez o amintire cu totul specială în legătură cu aprecierea pe care viitorul rege o avea și nădăjduiesc că o are și ca majestate regală față de natura din România, față de civilizația care s-a construit aici și chiar față de conservarea unei anumite griji față de natură. Vă mulțumesc, distinsă doamnă Mathieson, că sunteți împreună cu noi toți în această clădire monumentală, adevărat simbol al culturii românești, care este Ateneul Român, în această seară așa de specială, pe care cu siguranță nu o vom uita niciodată, pentru tot ceea ce înseamnă față de noi Royal Institution și conferințele de Crăciun. Îngăduiți-mi să o rog pe doamna Katherine Mathieson să primească reverența noastră. Vă mulțumesc!
Îi mulțumesc frumos, excelențe sale, domnul președinte al Academiei, profesorul Ioan Aurel Pop, și acum I'll switch back to English, and it is an honor for me, and it is a true privilege to invite Director Abdi Hassan of the British Council of Romania and Bulgaria. Was it correct? Okay, thank you very much.
It was correct and excellently said as well. Your Royal Highness, Princess Sofia, the President of the Romanian Academy, the Director of the Royal Institution, scientists, science friends and enthusiasts, buonasera. It's a real pleasure to be here in this remarkable setting, the Romanian Athenaeum. This is my third or fourth time in this building, and every time I come here, I am absolutely taken away with how fantastically and wonderful arts and culture comes alive in this place. A place where knowledge, beauty, and curiosity meet. I bring warm greetings from His Majesty, the Ambassador from the UK to Romania, Giles Portman, who sends his best wishes, congratulations to all involved in making this evening possible. Tonight, we celebrate why science matters. Because science is not only about formulas or facts, it's about imagination, discovery, and of course, wonder. It's about asking why and daring to asking it again and again. And it's only the beginning. Tomorrow evening, and I will mention a couple of events that Katherine has graciously agreed to be part of. So tomorrow evening, we will host the Science Cafe. And the title is Women in Science, organized with the British Embassy and the Rotary Club at the Intercontinental Athenaeum Place. There is another event taking place on Thursday, and we turn from science to stories, with Black voices, shared stories, One Romania, held at the George Enescu Hall at the National University of Music, Bucharest. That evening will shine a light on the lived experiences of Black people in Romania. And many ways, diversity enriches who we are and how we learn. It is part of the series of celebrating Black History Month in the UK. You are invited to both of them, and it will take place on Thursday, starting at 6 p.m. But tonight, as we listen to Katherine Mathieson, let's remember this. Science is not about knowing, it's about understanding. Not only about progress, but about possibility. May tonight spark the kind of curiosity that keeps us all learning, creating, and connecting. Mulțumesc. But before I finish, I should really extend, and could you join me in thanking Professor Andrei Matsumoka for the fantastic work that you have done to make this possible. So please, a round of applause for Professor Andrei.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you all. And now we are going towards the musical prelude. 30 years we began with a musical prelude, and I shall call, hope they hear me, I shall call on Raluca Enia and Rafael Butaru. Nobody's moving. Okay, till they come, I have to tell you, quite a few of us, of you would certainly know them both. They give life to pre-classic music, and tonight they will invite you to a history back into, to a voyage back in time to, well, the 1700, and you shall listen music from 1 to 3 very famous composers, but since Raluca is not yet here, I have to tell you what happened when we discussed about this moment. I told Raluca, okay, look, since Katherine is English, I shall continue. I told Raluca, okay, since Katherine is English, I think I would like to ask you to find some English composer. And Raluca examined me and well, marked a few seconds. Then she told me, well, but did you forget that besides the great celebrations everybody is speaking about for this year, we have 2 more very important celebrations, because in 1685, 2 very great composers were born. The first one is Johann Sebastian Bach. The second one is Handel, and they are present in the program that Raluca and Rafael prepared for tonight. I shall for just a second go back to Romanian. Nu putea să se încheie programul fără un alt uriaș al muzicii, cam din aceeași perioadă, se încheie cu Corelli și cu sau de La Folia a lui Corelli, și asta am considerat că trebuie să nu uităm că nebunia pe care o veți găsi în muzica lui Corelli, interpretată de ei, este în mare parte nebunia pe care o trăiește lumea în aceste momente. Bless you. Thank you very much, Raluca. Le mulțumesc frumos de tot Ralucăi și lui Rafael. Înainte de a o invita așa cum trebuie pe Katherine, aș vrea să vă spun doar două vorbe. Poate ați observat, recitalul a început cu unul dintre cele mai frumoase lucruri scrise. So the concert began with probably one of the most beautiful things that were ever written by a composer. The prelude in C major by Johann Sebastian Bach, who is the first in his volumes of preludes, and ended with the La Horia. So I wish that our life, since physics says that it is traveling back in time is not possible. Okay, we can try to reverse time and start living a life which starts with the madness of Corelli and ends with the serenity of Johann Sebastian Bach. Katherine, this evening is yours.
Thank you so much. Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, it is an utter privilege to be here with you this evening in this beautiful hall, in this beautiful city, in this beautiful country. It's a very special occasion. It is the 2025 is the year of quantum, 100 years since the key discoveries that have given rise to the current quantum technologies. It is 225 years since the Royal Institution was granted a Royal Charter, and it is 160 years since the inauguration in Bucharest of the public conferences of the Romanian Athenaeum Society. So a quick thank you to begin with to everybody involved in organising this gorgeous event. I want to use this occasion to try and bring alive the mission of the Royal Institution, a mission which started in a glorious building in London and which has spread across the world, and which I hope you will be able to support as well. We are really honoured that your own tradition of Christmas lectures, of which this is merely one, that began in 2013 with a lecture by Tom Kibble, that was inspired by the Christmas lectures at the Royal Institution, which started exactly 200 years ago in London. The title of this talk is Why Science Matters. Now, I'm going to try and suggest to you that, of course, science matters, and it matters a lot to scientists. But I think also science matters to all of us, and I hope at the end of this talk you will agree with me. Of course, science matters. It's evident from the world around us that science has the power to produce amazing changes that benefit the world. From the discovery of critical minerals that underpin many of our groundbreaking technologies, drones, combating forest fires. The picture is from the forest fires in California in 2019. To the technologies that keep the skyscrapers in the sky. The technologies that enable life-saving vaccines across the world. The new genomic technologies which will form the basis of healthcare in the decades to come. And the automotive technologies which are giving rise to autonomous and electric vehicles. Of course, science matters. And science matters here in Romania as well. From the first steps in aviation and the discovery of insulin, to groundbreaking companies like Bitdefender, AI is fueling a new wave of innovation. And I've tried to feature a couple of the most groundbreaking technologies on this slide here, including companies called The Brief, Uni, perhaps particularly useful for anyone who's planning to attend university in the coming years, and a company called Juman, which is using AI to produce glasses for visually impaired people. So perhaps you might think, all is well in the world of science. We have the science we need, and it is enabling us to improve lives across the globe. But I think what's key is that we shouldn't leave scientists to get on with their research behind closed doors. This is perhaps a more traditional model of science, that they bury themselves away with their specialist laboratories and nobody should disturb them. Don't even knock on the door, they might say. I don't think this is quite the true model of science, and I don't think it's the model that we need for the future. So let me tell you a little bit about the Royal Institution. And let's start at the beginning. The Royal Institution was founded in March in 17. From a meeting at a house belonging to Sir Joseph Banks in Soho Square in central London. And the attendees were a bit like Joseph Banks himself. They were men of science. They were men. They were natural philosophers. They were landowners and philanthropists. And they came together to form the Royal Institution. And they each put in an amount of money equal to 50 guineas. And 50 guineas, we don't use guineas very often still in the UK, to the amount of money you would pay per year to the highest paid member of your household staff, which was invariably your cook. So they put 50 guineas in each. The house in which that amazing meeting was held is now demolished in the 1930s. But the fireplace from that house was purchased for the Institution by the time, and he brought it, the whole fireplace, to the building that now houses the Royal Institution. And if you ever come to London and you come to the Royal Institution, and I very much hope you all will, you can see that fireplace where it all started. And the objects of the Royal Institution are to diffuse the knowledge and facilitate the general introduction of useful mechanical inventions and improvements, to teach by courses of philosophical lectures and experiments the application of science to the common purposes of life, to promote chemical science by experiments and lectures for improving arts and manufactures, to discover the uses of the mineral and other natural productions of this country, and, if that wasn't enough, to diffuse and extend useful knowledge in general. I think we can agree that covers quite a broad range of things. This is set out in the Royal Charter that was granted in 1800, and the phrase I've highlighted in bold has become really important to us: the application of science to the common purposes of life. Of course, science moves on and changes, and the common purposes of life change, but the application of science for those purposes, that is core to the purpose and the mission of the Royal Institution. So the proprietors began by buying a townhouse in central London and made a start on building some laboratories. This building, which, apart from the horses, looks fairly similar today, it was actually 3 houses that were combined, and later the columns in front, perhaps not dissimilar to the columns at the front of this building tonight, the columns were added to make it seem like one building. And in addition to building the laboratories, the founders started building a theatre. And the theatre, I believe, is one of the reasons why so many discoveries were made at the Royal Institution. So let's hear a little bit more about those discoveries. This is a watercolour from 1852 by Harriet Moore, and it shows the laboratory as it would have been in the 1800s. Built in the basement, you can see the light coming in through a skylight. Big, long rooms filled with apparatus. And all of the apparatus would have been wood, glass, metal, paper. There's no plastic and there's no computers. And laboratories nowadays would look very different. And to think of the discoveries they made with the limited materials that they had is really quite astonishing. The research began with some very practical applications of science to the common purposes of life. I'm just going to zip back to this one. This is a paper, as you can see, by Thomas Parker, who was working with Count Rumford and others in the very early days of the Royal Institution. And they were occupied with questions like, how do you keep the gate to your field closed so that your sheep don't wander off and get lost and cause problems? And they devised a gate that will swing back on its hinges to close automatically if somebody leaves it open. They did a lot of work on fireplaces and the shape that fireplaces need to be to ensure that the heat comes forward into the room and the smoke goes up the chimney and not into the room. They did a lot of experiments on the nutritional properties of cabbage, which you might think is not a very exciting arena of research, but if you're trying to feed an army, as the nation was at the time, it's crucial. And you can see, I think, how the application of science to the common purposes of life came about. And it led to some astonishing discoveries. So this image is Sir Humphry Davy, who I think you've heard mentioned a couple of times already this evening. And he was working at a time where the battery was first in use as an experimental tool, the beginnings of the field of electrochemistry. And he used the battery to split common compounds and discovered or first isolated 9 different elements: potassium, sodium, barium, calcium, magnesium, strontium, boron, chlorine, iodine. And if you come to the Royal Institution, and I hope you will, you can see the very first samples of these elements on display in the exhibition. Davy is also recognised for his work on the miner's lamp. This is a very good example of the application of science to the common purposes of life. At the time Davy was working, in the early 1800s, there was a lot of mining in the northern parts of England, and there were a lot of miners, people working in the mines, losing their lives because of the phenomenon of fire damp, it was called. Miners would use candles. They would take their candles down into the mines, otherwise they could see nothing. They would take the candles down, they would walk into the mines, they would begin work. If they hit a patch of flammable gas, the flame from the candle would ignite the gas and lives would be lost. And so Humphry Davy was asked to come up with the design of a lamp that would be safe for the miners to take. And after 2 months of intensive experiments in 1815, he came up with this design, which uses a gauze candle flame that contains the flame. Effectively, it keeps the heat within the gauze. And there were no more explosions. And that way, many, many lives were saved. But Humphry Davy, later on in life, was asked, "What is your greatest discovery?" And he said, very generously, "It's Michael Faraday." Michael Faraday was an inspirational scientist, and the Royal Institution's theatre was the connection between them. Faraday is a really interesting case study because he came from a poor background, a very deprived area of South London, and he was apprenticed as a young teenager to a bookbinder. And he was trying to, in between learning how to bind the books, i.e. pull all the pages together so that it can form a book that you can open and read. He was supposed to be learning about bookbinding, but he was cheekily reading lots of things around science. And some of the customers, some of the people who came to that bookbinding shop encouraged him in this interest and would lend him books to read. And somebody gave him a ticket to the final set of Humphrey Davy's lectures. And I will tell you more about the Royal Institution lectures later. But you can see here that one of the set of lectures that Faraday was given a ticket to was being given by Humphrey Davy in 1812. It turns out to be the last set of lectures that Davy ever gave. So it was fortunate that Faraday had a ticket, and he loved those lectures. He was blown away by the discoveries that Davy was talking about. And as a bookbinder's apprentice, what do you do when you love somebody's lectures? You make them a book. So he carefully wrote notes of everything that Davy said, drew all the diagrams, bound all the pages together in a beautiful book, and came to the Royal Institution and presented it to Davy and asked for a job. And Davy said, well, it's a lovely book, but no thanks to the job, which was a bit of a blow for Michael Faraday. Fortunately for Faraday, a little bit later, Humphrey Davy's lab assistant was fired for misbehavior. And one person's misfortune is another person's good luck. Humphrey Davy remembered that there was a really enthusiastic potential lab assistant who'd made a beautiful book, and he got in touch with him, and Michael Faraday joined him in the laboratory and in the theatre. And the work they did together was fantastic. The discoveries that Michael Faraday made have formed the basis for the modern world. This elegant piece of apparatus, composed only of glass and wire and metal, is effectively the basis for the electric motor on which all of our or so much of our technology depends. I could do a whole lecture about Faraday, but I want to tell you a little bit about some of the other scientists who worked at the Royal Institution too, and the discoveries that they are known for. John Tyndall is much less well known than Davy or Faraday. His seminal work was on atmospheric chemistry, and he was the first person to realize that the concentration of gases in the atmosphere might change how the atmosphere retains heat. And he coined the phrase greenhouse gases. He understood the chemistry of climate change back in the mid-1800s, long before it became an observable phenomenon. In 1865, the same year as the inauguration of the Romanian Athenaeum Society, John Tyndall gave the Christmas lectures all about the physics of sound. In 1923, this is William Henry Bragg, who developed what has become essentially a whole new field of X-ray crystallography, using X-rays to beam them through crystalline molecules in order to work out the shape of those molecules. It's quite a complex discipline, because you have to use these pictures of X-rays to work out where the pieces of molecule have been, which the X-rays have bounced off. A bit like an X-ray of your body, but at a tiny, tiny, tiny scale. And William Henry Bragg worked very closely with his son, William Lawrence Bragg. I don't know why they called them both William, but anyway. And the father and son worked together on the structure of crystals. The son, Lawrence, his contribution was to develop Bragg's law, an equation which allows that photograph to be understood as a three-dimensional structure. In 1915, Henry and Lawrence Bragg jointly won the Nobel Prize for Physics. And William Lawrence Bragg he was aged 25 at the time he won the Nobel Prize. The beautiful certificate is his Nobel Prize, which we keep at the Royal Institution. And he remains the youngest ever winner of a scientific Nobel Prize. I want to tell you also about the work of Kathleen Lonsdale, who was working in the 20th century at the Royal Institution at a time where it was fairly unusual for a woman scientist to be working. She worked with the Braggs on the crystallographic structure of materials, and in 1929 she used these techniques to understand the structure of a chemical called benzene, which underpins a lot of industrial processes still. And benzene was not a new chemical. In fact, Michael Faraday himself had been the first person to isolate benzene back in 1825. But there was no agreement about the shape of benzene. And Kathleen Lonsdale used X-ray crystallography to prove that benzene is a flat hexagon shape, a planar shape, and that has given rise to the field of aromatic chemistry, organic chemistry. She's also unusual in that she did a lot of work to support others working in her discipline. She was a great mentor and an advisor to other scientists, and she published very intricate data tables, which in an era before being able to look things up on Google, sped up lots of other people's work. She's remembered as one of the 2 first women fellows of the Royal Society for her achievements. This is James Dewar, who developed this shiny metallic flask, a vacuum flask, which he exhibited for the first time on Christmas Day, 1892. And he was very excited about using it to cool things down, using the vacuum between the 2 layers of the flask to cool liquids and to keep them cool. And he used it to create liquid hydrogen in 1898. He never patented this discovery, and it was later patented by 2 German glassblowers who were not interested in keeping things cold. They were more interested in keeping things hot. And they set up what is now the Thermos Flask Company. And finally, I want to refer you to the research of George Porter, Lord George Porter, who joined the Royal Institution in 1963 and stayed for 25 years. In 1976, he won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for work he'd carried out at the Royal Institution, understanding chemical reactions that are triggered by light, which has become the basis of the chemistry of photovoltaic solar panels, which you can see on roofs and in fields across the country. He was a very active lecturer as well. He did the Christmas lectures twice in 1969 and 1976, like many of the other researchers who've gone before him. And despite being a London townhouse, we still have researchers in the building, and it's still very important to us that scientific discovery goes on in the building. We host a team of mathematical and theoretical physics researchers known as the London Institute for Mathematical Sciences. This is a genuine blackboard that hangs up in their space. I have no idea what it says. They are very passionate about doing groundbreaking maths and theoretical physics research as part of a historic scientific institution. They recently founded the Arnold and Landau Fellowships to support researchers in maths and theoretical physics who are fleeing the regime in Russia and Belarus. We also have some biomaterials researchers. So this team of researchers are part of the University College London, and they host their biomagnetics healthcare laboratory. Effectively, they are trying to use magnetic and nanomaterials to find and treat cancer. Very much an application of science to the common purposes of life. We also have a partnership with Imperial College London, one of London's other big scientific universities, a partnership which is focused on climate innovation, partly in tribute to the work that John Tyndall did to characterize and understand greenhouse gases. We're keen to continue playing a role in developing technologies that will reduce and mitigate climate change and its effects on our environment. Again, application of science to the common purposes of life. So I believe this link between the laboratory and the theatre has been crucial to the discoveries that have been made at the Royal Institution. The lecturers would make their discoveries in the basement laboratories and then run up 2 flights of stairs to the theatre and tell the public about them. Davy's lectures back in the early 1800s were so popular that the street on which the Royal Institution sits became the first one-way street in London, and it's still one-way now. So what can we learn from this? I believe that scientists, if they're shut away behind a closed door, it makes it more difficult for them to do their best work. That in dialogue with public audiences, this is how we support scientists to achieve the things that we all really need them to achieve. And this has been part of our approach since the founding in 1799. And sometimes we have been criticized for it. So this is a cartoon from 1802, right at the beginning, after Humphrey Davy had only just arrived. And it's a cartoon that appeared in a newspaper by a famous cartoonist called James Gilray. And this is not polite. So the way he's drawn people with these exaggerated features, he's making fun of the Royal Institution and the audiences. And this was quite a common viewpoint. The person who's holding the bellows, the red bellows at the back, looking a bit fiendish, that's Humphrey Davy. And the person who is taking in the gas, and I'm not going to explain what he's doing with that gas, but he's taking in the gas. He was the treasurer of the Royal Institution at the time. This is very disrespectful too. And it was common to criticize the Royal Institution for 2 reasons. One, because we did live demonstrations. We tried to bring the science to life by doing amazing demonstrations in the theatre. And 2, we let women and children into the audience at a time where it was thought that science belonged only to men. And so we heard this criticism and we leaned in. We made these aspects of our work core to the approach. This image shows Michael Faraday, who started the Christmas lectures in 1825. In this picture, he's giving a Christmas lecture in 1855. And you can see in the audience, there are children, there are women, and you can see on the bench that Faraday is doing a number of live demonstrations to show the principles of his work. At the time when Faraday started the Christmas lectures, there was no formal education for most young people in the country. Very, very little in the way of scientific education. And he wanted the Christmas lectures to be for teenagers. He wanted them to understand the best of the scientific discoveries that were going on at that point. And we still do that. We still try to accomplish his vision for the Christmas lectures 200 years later. Faraday gave 19 sets of Christmas lectures in total, and the very final one was called On the Chemical History of a Candle. And it was the first to be published in book form. And that book, On the Chemical History of a Candle, is still in print. It's amazing how much chemistry you can learn with a candle and a match. So the Christmas lectures have been given every year since 1825, with a couple of gaps for the Second World War, and they continue to go from strength to strength. We also give talks to, throughout our history, we have also given talks to adult audiences. So this is James Dewar, whose vacuum flask I showed you earlier, giving a discourse lecture, the most prestigious form of lectures at the Royal Institution, in 1904, and he's demonstrating the liquefaction of hydrogen, the technology which enables us to put spaceships into space today. This is the theatre at the Royal Institution, not quite as grand as this one here, but very dear to us anyway. And you can see on the wall here the technology that was the forerunner to PowerPoint slides, which was essentially you had to paint your diagrams on a very big sheet, like a bed sheet, and hang it on the wall, and you had to find somebody with a very big stick to point at the right sheet in the middle of your talk. This image is Lawrence Bragg in 1961, giving a Christmas lectures series about electricity. particularly static electricity. Lawrence Bragg is the person with the red balls in front of him, which he's using to demonstrate electrostatics. And the gentleman on the other side of the stage area who's winding a machine called a Wimshurst machine to generate static electricity, he was called Bill Coates, and he was a laboratory assistant or a demonstrations technician. And I'm going to say more about that role shortly. One of the features of the Royal Institution's Christmas lectures is that we try to do as many hands-on demonstrations as we can possibly fit in. In these images, you can see on the left a lecture from 1937 with Julian Huxley talking about rare animals and the disappearance of wildlife. Huxley campaigned to protect endangered species, and he went on to found the World Wildlife Federation. And in this lecture, he was assisted by a lion cub called Max, which he's cheerfully encouraging a young girl to stroke. And I like to think we've got a little bit better about our health and safety approach since 1937. In 1973, David Attenborough gave the Christmas lectures, and some of you might have seen his series about the natural world on TV or on YouTube. He's been tremendously influential, and he's holding some kind of gecko lizard thing here. And David Attenborough was the person who was responsible for putting the Christmas lectures on TV, where it could reach a much wider audience. The first Christmas lecture was on TV in 1936, making it one of the very first science TV programs ever. And they were regularly shown on the BBC, the public service broadcaster in the UK, from 1966. And they still are today. So this is a screen grab from last year's Christmas lectures that were on the BBC's iPlayer platform. We worked with a medical doctor and nutrition researcher called Chris Van Tulleken to do, in 3 lectures, the science of food. And we did have a lot of fun with the demonstrations for that lecture. Sometimes we hark back to demonstrations or lectures that have been given in the past. So, for example, this photo I took last week from the balcony of the Royal Institution Lecture Theatre. And 3 of my colleagues have a piece of equipment that was used in 1978, a wave machine that was used by the Christmas lecturer Christopher Zeman, who was a mathematician. And it's a series of parallel bars with elastic wire threaded through the middle. And you can use this wave machine to propagate waves across the bars. The machine was actually built for the 1906 Christmas lectures and also used by William Lawrence Bragg in the 1960s, and again last week by a mathematician called Marcus de Sautoy. And I think this is really interesting that because we have a store of objects and stories from over 200 years of Christmas lectures, we can bring out the relevant pieces of history for people to really see and experience in a tangible way. Last week's lecture by Marcus de Sautoy it was all about maths and creativity in music, and it involved a piece of music by a live cellist who played a piece by a Romanian-born composer that you may have heard of, Ioannis Xenakis. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, let me know and I can send you the link. The other thing that the Christmas lectures are famous for is being playful, theatrical, making use of the fact that we are in a theatre. We're known for our use of volunteers. So this is an image from the Christmas lectures in 2019. The person in the middle with the pink jumper is mathematician Hannah Fry. The person in the red shirt is Matt Parker, a mathematician and comedian. And the person on the far side in the dark jacket is a poor volunteer who's just been dragged out of the audience to help. And they are demonstrating the properties of a Christmas present wrapping robot. So the red box between Hannah and Matt is a robot that will wrap your Christmas presents for you. And it's spitting out Christmas presents all wrapped really quickly. Now, the reason why you can't buy this robot in the shops is because if I was to turn the red box around, what you would see inside is my colleague, Gemma, hiding and posting pre-wrapped presents out of the slot. And when we turn the machine round and show the young people that this is the secret of theatre, they love it. They love being in on the secret. And that's part of why we lean in to having a theatre and being playful and theatrical. But why is it that we spend so much time developing amazing demonstrations, getting young people involved in a way that they experience as exciting? I think it's important for several reasons. So, firstly, it's really important that we inform and empower people to make decisions about their own lives and the worlds that they live in. This might be in a very specific context. For example, finding out how to deal with a pest in your garden, or deciding how you can save money on energy bills. Or it could be broader. It could be feeling informed about a local wind farm. It could be helping a family member to make a decision about medical treatment. We all have many such decisions ahead of us in our lifetimes. And we will need to draw on what we know about science and technology in order to make those decisions in an informed way. We also have decisions ahead of us as a society. When and how should we use nuclear energy, for example? Should we exploit mineral deposits on the moon? How can we screen for disease? How can we make our neighborhoods safer? All of these decisions rest on science too. And they all require all groups within society to be able to contribute to the debate and the decision-making. This might be a really intense and detailed, deliberative dialogue policy-making decision, or it might be a 2-minute exchange of views on a social media platform. This is all about helping us collectively as a society to make sense of science and to achieve our goals for science. Science activities also have value that is not actually about science at all. It's about well-being or community cohesion. If you think about community gardens, allotments, a bicycle repair club, a sports program, they're all using science as a context for activities to improve the well-being of the people who participate. Science has the capacity to generate powerful feelings such as awe and wonder and joy. Many professional scientists were themselves first inspired, for example, by staring up at the stars on a dark night, or a fascination with the natural world, the mountains, the oceans. I think sometimes awe and wonder is overlooked, less valued than other forms of science activity, because it is a form of cultural participation, perhaps less valuable than a utilitarian approach to more functional forms of engagement. But I think this is a mistake. At a time where there is so much concern about public trust in science and in institutions, we should be taking every opportunity to connect to audience demand for science and respond to that. And I believe that the Christmas lectures are a brilliant case study of generating awe and wonder and joy in science. At the Royal Institution, we believe science is for everyone, and we strive to bring public and scientists together to share their interest and their passion for science, to empower people to explore and get involved, to be a home for science in which everyone is welcome. And this is the kind of activity that we do now. So you can see coming up, well, competing right now with this talk and coming up for the rest of the week, this is a snapshot of the activities, the talks coming up for public audiences at the Royal Institution. So you can see that our discourse, second from left, this is a quantum-themed discourse at the beginning of next month to celebrate that this is Year of Quantum, with a fantastic speaker, Jim Al-Khalili, and I encourage you to have a look out for that. Many of the talks that take place in our theatre are live streamed, so people can join from across the world, and they do, and they have the opportunity to ask questions of the speakers exactly the same as people in the room. So if you're interested, I encourage you to get involved. We also offer events for families and teenagers, less often live streamed, and we host events by a wide range of other scientific institutions. And the work we do with other scientific institutions is often to identify the key research topics in their area so that we can help them bring those topics into greater public awareness. Before I finish, I want to give you a brief snapshot of the ways in which our activities have changed most in the last few years. Being able to broadcast the Christmas lectures on TV enabled us to open up science content to a much wider range of people than before. And the technologies which have enabled us to extend that work even further are social media platforms. YouTube in particular, you can see from this screen grab that the Royal Institution's YouTube channel has over 1.6 million subscribers, and that number goes up every day. This puts us in the top 0.02% of all science YouTube channels. We try to cover as broad a range of topics in our YouTube talks as in our theatre. So I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about science, to have a look at this YouTube channel. We don't stick to YouTube though. We have a growing audience on Facebook. We've just reached 1 million followers for our Facebook clips. And the blue image in the top left shows Maggie Adarin Pocock, and she is the speaker for this year's Christmas Lectures, 2025 Christmas Lectures. And her 3 talks about space science and astronomy will be on YouTube for you to watch around the 28th of December, so do look out for it. She's an inspiring speaker, a perfect choice for the 200th anniversary. And this is our community, people who enjoy science. And we find that community across all the platforms. So we're on TikTok as well, and as I understand from the data I looked at last week, that there are 13 million social media users in Romania, around 2/3 of the population. I don't think you're all on TikTok, but many of you are. It's the most popular social media platform in Romania for 25 to 34-year-olds. And our view is that if we're not on TikTok, then those young people are getting their scientific information from other organizations who may not have access to authoritative, respected, credible science. So we embrace the TikTok vibe, but we try to make sure that our science is authoritative and true. TikToks and YouTube films don't replace education, of course. They complement it. Formal scientific education is just as important as informal cultural participation. And to respond to this need, we have a range of schools programs across the UK, which take the best of what we've learned from Christmas lectures over 200 years and take them into school settings across the UK, all about captivating demonstrations and opportunities for hands-on activities. So I believe that cultural participation in science is just as important as other forms of participation in science. It forms a bedrock of trust in science, which enable all of us to participate, to enable the science that we want to see as a society, and that will create the future we want for ourselves and our children. It's been a real privilege to talk to you this evening about the Royal Institution from one theatre to another. And I want to finish with a few final thank yous again to the very many people and organisations who have made this evening possible. Thank you very much. That's right.
Okay, thank you very much. That's what I was looking for, because now we have the questions and answers session. So As we usually do in these lectures, we have one more display on one side and the other on the other side. So, hands up.
Hello. So, in your opinion, besides Michael Faraday, what do you think is the most important discovery at the Royal Institution?
Well, that's a great question. I think it would be very hard to single out a single scientific discovery because there are so many of them. The thing that most surprised me when I started being part of the Royal Institution team was how many people are really curious and interested in science. So I'm one of those people myself, but I didn't realize that there were 1.67 million people on YouTube with the same interest, you know, that I have. And so it's been a real privilege for me getting to know the audiences of the Royal Institution, the schools, the public, the researchers themselves, and to see how much support there is for this idea that science is a cultural activity, a form of cultural participation. You're very welcome.
Okay, next question.
Thank you. Seeing as to how the science of today has been straying further and further away from the realms of the understandable for the common man, do you believe that soon we will reach a point where even the most fundamental of physics for the people living in a so-called ivory tower in the realm of science will be almost impossible to understand without years of special learning, leading to a needed gap between people that are part of the realm of science and people that are part of the common world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is becoming increasingly difficult, maybe even impossible, to be a polymath in the way that Michael Faraday and Humphrey Davy would have been, Leonardo da Vinci, for example, to be able to make groundbreaking discoveries across such a broad range of fields. I think that you need so much time to go deep into your discipline to be able to be at the cutting edge of research that it's difficult to have novel discoveries in this field over here and then a completely unrelated field. Not impossible, but much more difficult than it would have been 100 years ago or 200 years ago. But I think that the ideas, for most of us, we are not going to be making those discoveries, you know. And I think the ideas of science, yes, they might be more complex, but also we have more tools with which to understand them. So if you think about the first time that Michael Faraday demonstrated the electric motor, he would have had these tiny, delicate apparatus, these two very thin needles, and he would have applied an electric current, and one of the needles would have started moving without him touching it. And to everybody in the theatre that night, that would have seemed like magic, right? How do you understand this? How is he moving a metal needle without touching it? Okay, so now we think, well, of course, it's an electromagnetic field, right? It's not hard to understand, but it would have been very hard for the audience at the time, I think. And we're at that stage now, I think, with understanding some forms of AI, with understanding quantum computing, that it's very hard conceptually to get our head around it. But I think perhaps a generation, 2 generations' time, it will seem very common to them to be able to talk about these concepts. I also think, partly because of AI, we have more access to AI-enabled learning and tutors. We have more access to 3-dimensional visualizations. We have access, thanks to the internet, to everything that has ever been known about science. And we can use that knowledge to go on self-directed journeys to improve our learning. So I think exactly what you said is true, and also we shouldn't despair too much. Thank you. Yes.
Good evening. So I'm conducting a clinical study regarding the power of the sound for the baby while they are in the 3rd semester with the unborn. So I want to ask you if you have developed any program regarding the power of the sound for the brain or for the water.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have research programs that would align with that directly, I don't think. But I think this is a great example of a research question that everybody can understand, right? And that perhaps other people can help with. So depending on the data you're collecting, it's an amazing tool to help people understand how science can change their lives and their families' lives very directly. I once worked with a researcher who was very interested in rheumatoid arthritis, a condition which causes a lot of pain, and which people anecdotally say that their pain is affected by the weather. And what he wanted was to collect lots of data from people with this medical condition and for them to give him their pain data with the date attached so that he could match that against the weather forecast, and developed an app to collect the data called Cloudy with a Chance of Pain, and used it to prove that there was this correlation between reported levels of pain and weather. And the people who helped him, ordinary people with a very particular health condition, were effectively becoming citizen scientists. They were becoming involved in cutting-edge research. And for many of them, it changed their whole relationship, both with their disease area and with science more broadly. So I encourage you in that very worthwhile endeavor.
My question is about what can we do to help spread science in Romania, for example, because as far as I know, we have a very underfunded science and research system. And my question is, what can we do as regular people to help encourage science and education in a country which doesn't really fund it?
That's a fantastic question. So I would love to see, well, maybe I could start by asking you to look at the shields on the ceiling, which, when I first came into this space, I was really struck that next to theology, you have biology, chemistry, physics, agriculture. You have all of the disciplines, not just arts, not just social science, not just natural science, not just physical science. And I think this is really important in enabling people to make links between different topics and to make links between topics like these and their own lives, that we experience our life in the round with all of these different topics. I encourage you to start science festivals, to invite researchers to give science talks in places like this and in cafes down the road, small places, big places. The more that you can work with your scientific community to draw out of them the amazing stories that they really want to share with you, I promise you, I think the richer that relationship will feel. I think in terms of funding, it's a challenge for universities across Europe at the moment, and science is increasingly expensive. Think about things like CERN or the International Space Station. Collaboration has been the key to securing the level of investment that we need, collaboration within countries, but particularly between countries and between disciplines.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Katherine, for your nice talk. We see in our century that from science to helping people is just a step. If last century a lot of investment and a lot of opportunities came from mathematics and physics, we know that this century everybody discusses about technologies, and it was mentioned at the beginning that it's a possibility. In the artificial intelligence, just a quick answer to my questions: if the will be put in the position to have priority between artificial intelligence and quantum computing, what do you think that will be the winner? Quantum computing or artificial intelligence? I know that both of them are a priority in our century. Thank you very much for this nice evening.
What an exciting question. Well, I try not to have any favorite sciences because it doesn't seem very fair, but I think that artificial intelligence will radically affect our society, our everyday lives, but also the speed and pace with which we can make discoveries. Having said that, the key enabler of artificial intelligence has been compute power. So how to get a lot of computing power in a small physical space in a rapid space of time. And quantum computing is going to completely redefine what we think a lot of compute power is even like. So the fact that the two technologies are coming to fruition, as it were, coming to practical usage from their theoretical basis, you know, quantum physics has been, you know, expressed around. Finally, somebody can build a computer with it. It's taken a while. Artificial intelligence, you know, computer science has been thinking about this for at least 40 years. Finally, we can do something with it. So the fact that these two technologies are coming to practical, on a very similar timeline is fascinating because it means they will interact and drive each other forward. And it's interesting to think, what if we had artificial intelligence early? Of this, the computing revolution 100 years earlier than it actually did. Maybe we would have had AI for 100 years already by now, but that didn't happen. So these two technologies, I think, will accelerate and catalyze each other in what will be a really, really fascinating way. I'm excited for the future.
Good evening, and thank you for your lecture. Given that many people believe that all of the major breakthroughs have already been discovered, how do you see the future of research? Great question.
So sometimes when I give talks in schools, I have this, the reaction from some of the young people, and I'm talking 9, 10-year-olds, they react as if science is finished. Like, we have all the facts. What are you doing? Like, going to look for more facts? And they're really surprised when I tell them that there's loads of things we don't know. For example, most of the universe is missing. Dark matter, dark energy, where is it? What is it? Who knows? Most of the universe is missing, so that's quite a big topic. We don't really know what thoughts are made of. They're sort of made of electricity. Discuss, right? There are these huge topics, and that when I explain work questions that nobody knows the answers to, that sometimes feels quite different from science at school. Do well in science at school, you have to give the same answer that your teacher wants you to give. Whereas the work of a scientist is to find the answers where nobody knows what they're going to be. And that feels quite exciting, I think. And I'm sure with the help of AI and quantum computing, we will find even more topics that we just haven't even begun to understand.
Good evening. Thank you for your lecture. I want to ask, do you think there is a discrepancy between the level of evolution for quantum computing hardware and software? Like, there is a lot of evolution in the hardware area, but nobody's actually working on the software area. That's what I mean. Do you think this is a real problem? And if it is a real problem, how would you?
Yes, great question. So I'm coming at this question. From my viewpoint, I agree completely that I think it is difficult to develop the software without having the hardware to use it on, to practice with. And so currently the software development for quantum computers is being held back a little bit until we've got the devices that will use the software or not test very much. I think explode when the hardware is ready for us to do thing. And there are in the history of this, we had to or an instrument or good enough lots of so you could of tailing off scope whole dimension that wasn't visible. About off a polyect curve can build amazing telescopes. And suddenly, I think we might be in one of these inflection points. We're thinking about quantum. I think that would be a fantastic choice.
Firstly, good evening, and thank you for your lecture. What would you say to a young woman career in the STEM field, such as a woman in? Thank you.
Particularly, but also men who are allies and champions of women in disciplines where women are underrepresented. One of the things that's very important is to share the learning, share the stories. Science and society are both better when underrepresented groups are more fairly represented in those disciplines. So this is the work for all of us. I would say that you ought to, and perhaps all of you who have a similar question, try to study as many things as possible for as long as possible, because it's quite difficult to know where your passion will really, which subject it will come. You know, you might be in the final year of a university course and you do a tiny bit of geology and you think, this is my subject, this is my thing. So I would encourage breadth, which is a little bit different from what a lot of research scientists would say. They would say, you know, you've got to do just chemistry, you know, like focus, focus. Whereas actually, the big discoveries will often come from cross-disciplines, disciplines working together. And the broader you are, the more options you will have in choosing your subject. I hope that's helpful, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Katherine. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness, for indulging us till the end. Thank you very much, Director Abdi Hassan, and hope to see you again. Thank you, Emilia. Thank you very much. Thank everybody who made possible this, this Christmas lecture. Okay, I shall do something inappropriate, but I can't resist. So in the 6th grade, we started studying physics in the elementary school, and our professor made an experiment in front of us, and the experiment was with the famous Wimser's machine. It was being made to rotate, and electricity was produced, and there were 2 spheres, and at the end you bring the spheres close to each other, and you have a spark, and everybody is excited. And so he took one of the classroom and said, okay, you will keep that and pay attention. And then he turned to the classroom and said, you idiots, it's very dangerous because the spark could destroy your eyes. And we hadn't the courage to move, and he went on and said, put your hands in front of your eyes. And so everybody put our hands in front of your eyes. And then he said, well, it's ready. We got the spark. You can relax. So we took the hand from in front of you, from our eyes, and he then very professorally, teacherly, he addressed the classroom and said, now you describe to me what happened there. And we said, how could we?
how could we explain and tell you what happened? Because you said we have to put the hands in front of our eyes. So we didn't see anything. And he said, well, you stupid people, okay, I told you to put the fingers like that in front of your eyes, but what you have to do, and this is what physicists do usually. You let a little bit of light to come through the fingers of your hand, and then you discover the world. Thank you very much, Katherine.
Okay, bless you and have a good evening.